as an annulment. I remember Britney Spears was once married, God bless her heart, for 55 hours, and that was about the Maxx Crosby Ravens era. He is now no longer a Raven. If you didn't see the news, we're about to get into it right now. Ian Rapoport, Tom Pelissero, I've never been more excited to bring you in, and I'm always excited to bring you in. You know, it's great to see you guys. You always tell us when these trades happen. Now, remember, it's not official till the start of the league year, and we're always like, yeah. And then we saw what happened last night, what's happening this morning. Ian, Tom, I want to hear your opinions on this. I want to hear your headlines. What the hell just happened with Maxx Crosby?
All right, so let's start with the facts of the situation. The trade for Maxx Crosby from the Las Vegas Raiders to the Baltimore Ravens for 2 first-round picks is now off. That is something that we learned via the Raiders last night, announcing that they had that the trade that we all thought was going to happen, the blockbuster trade, had been called off by the Ravens. Now, our understanding is this situation really escalated yesterday afternoon. Maxx Crosby was in Baltimore, was taking his physical. And remember, trades are contingent upon a player passing his physical. We can talk about it. We sort of assume nothing is final until a player passes his physical, and the team doctors and team personnel are all saying, okay, this is going to be fine. He is going to play for us. We have no issues. We have known, Tom, that Maxx Crosby underwent a full meniscus repair. That was right at the end of the season. Dr. Neil Elitros performed the procedure. It is about 2 months out from that. This is a 4 to 6 month recovery. This is something that we have known. We discussed this in the lead up to the Super Bowl on the pregame show. These were the facts, and the Ravens believed that Maxx Crosby's knee would be fine moving forward. And then they examined it. Then they did the full test. And they said, you know what? This is not going to be okay for us. It is a huge risk to do a trade like this. It is 2 first-round picks plus the contract. If they were not comfortable with the physical, then they should not move forward. And that is exactly what happened. The Ravens were not comfortable with what they saw. The trade is now off, and Crosby goes back to Las Vegas with the mindset of playing for the Raiders.
Here's what I would say. As big of a story as the Maxx Crosby trade being off is for fans, for the media, for Good Morning Football, it is a bigger story right now within the NFL. I have spoken over the past 12 hours since the news broke with roughly a dozen current and former NFL GMs. There are occasionally trades, signings that are vetoed because of some type of a medical issue. But no one I talked to could remember another example of a known medical issue scuttling a blockbuster trade like this, like the one that was just scuttled for Maxx Crosby. GMs that I spoke to, by and large, and I would say unanimously, took the stance that this is on Baltimore, that this is, to quote a few of the GMs I spoke to, dirty pool, that it is BS, that it is buyer's remorse. You are trading for a 29-year-old player with a known knee injury. It could not have been documented more. Maxx Crosby was on the injury report basically all last season. He barely practiced. He was shut down, much to his chagrin, with 2 games to go. He underwent meniscus surgery. He posted photos of himself on social media, pre and post-op. Ian reported that it was a meniscus repair, which is much longer on the timeline area than a meniscus trim would be, though better for the long-term health of the knee. Maxx Crosby is 8 weeks post-op. Everyone knew that. On top of that, he is a 29-year-old player that, if you examine a 29-year-old professional athlete's knee, it's not going to look the same as a 22-year-old professional athlete's knee. None of that prevented the Ravens and other teams from bidding significant resources to go and get Maxx Crosby. So while the Ravens, to Ian's point, have to do what is best for the Ravens, I would just tell you this, Kyle. This is going to have aftershocks for the Ravens, I would say, based on the conversations I've had, for years to come. I have spoken to GMs in the league right now who have said this would make them nervous about doing trades with the Ravens in the future. I have spoken to agents, one of which is a very high-profile agent that everyone knows with high-profile clients, who told me, I have told my agents I will not do deals with the Ravens again during the negotiating window. Everything in the NFL, in terms of trades, in terms of these handshake agreements that we have across the NFL in the negotiating window when nothing can be signed and finalized, are about trust. This was, in the opinion of people within the league, an example of the Ravens breaking that trust. It is not going to be isolated to simply Maxx Crosby. This is something that is going to be potentially felt moving forward here. Trapped in the middle of it is a guy in Maxx Crosby who got off crutches like a week ago, has a long road to recovery. Again, well documented, well known. His agents, I talked to other teams that were involved in the Maxx Crosby talks. Everyone said his agents, C.J. LeBoy and Doug Henderson, were up front. Listen, he's not going to be cleared until June. He's not going to do anything in the spring, but he'll be ready to roll before the start of next season. The Ravens saw something that made them nervous about the long-term health of Maxx Crosby's knee. But when you have committed to trading 2 first-round picks for a 29-year-old superstar pass rusher, it is understood within the league you have now taken on that risk. Again, not the first trade that's been scuttled by a medical issue, not the first Ravens trade that has been scuttled by a medical issue, but no one within the NFL can remember another example of something playing out like this. This story, Kyle, is just getting started.
Well, listen, we need to hear from the Ravens. We need to hear a lot of information from the Ravens because, meanwhile, at best out there are fans who are saying they got cold feet. At worst, there are fans suggesting that something shady is going on. And to your point, Tom, Ian says 2 months into a 4 to 6 month recovery. Maxx Crosby is on this very show in a scooter going around on live television. There is no bait and switch here. There is no surprise. And there's this sentiment amongst fans about what were you expecting to find when you looked at the physical? The surgeon is out there saying he's doing great. The agent is saying he's doing great. So what exactly was it you're expecting to find? We are going to go back to L.A., but Tom, I'm going to go back to you. And then, Ian, I want you to follow. Tom, you mentioned talking to people around the league, GMs, front offices. They're angry, they're saber rattling. What is it that they're suggesting the Ravens' motivation is? Why would they do this? Because they were supposedly excited to get Maxx Crosby, and then something changed.
If you go to a used car dealership and buy a Ferrari that's been driven for 8 years and you drive it off the lot, you don't really have a lot of recourse in terms of looking under the hood and going, boy, this doesn't look like a new car. That's the sense that people within the league have gotten. Now, the Ravens had a pre-trade agreement with the Raiders. That is standard practice. It allows them to examine the player. It gives them the rights to be able to put Maxx Crosby through a physical. They would have had his scans. They would have known the examinations that have been done. But when you're talking about NFL teams, there are 32 teams with 32 doctors and 32 degrees of risk tolerance. Not everybody, just like we see in the pre-draft process, is going to pass a player that another team would pass. Obviously, the Ravens, again, were averse to the risk once they examined the player. The issue that people within the league have with how this was handled is the fact that you had a known risk here. This is not Bashaud Breeland showing up to the Panthers in 2017 after agreeing to a contract and has a infected cut in his foot from a trip to the Dominican Republic. And the Panthers go, we can't sign you. You can't play. Maxx Crosby played all last season with a significant injury that required a surgery. He is still in the early stages of his recovery. His Dr. Neil Elatres says that he is on schedule. If anything, according to his agent, Maxx Crosby's agent, C.J. LeBoy, he is ahead of schedule in that recovery. Again, the Ravens have that right. This is a pre-trade agreement that is sent. Eric DaCosta loves Maxx Crosby, the player. He wants Maxx Crosby on the team. He came to the conclusion that he couldn't take on that risk. The question then becomes, was the risk something that the Ravens should have been fully aware of? And if they were going to commit this type of draft capital, at that point, do you ask the player to put a waiver on the knee? Do you potentially come back to the Raiders and try to adjust the compensation, which most GMs I've spoken to have said would be a non-starter if someone came back to them and tried to adjust the compensation? There's a lot of different layers to it, but it comes down to this. It wasn't out of nowhere. This could not have been a more documented injury. The Ravens knew that going into the process. The feeling within the league is this should not happen, that you agree to make this type of trade, that you have a pre-trade
first-round picks to the Raiders for the rights to one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. They wanted it all to happen, and when it seemed like it was falling apart, they still tried to make it work. They just were not comfortable with the medical. They were not comfortable that the player they believed they were acquiring was going to be at a point where he could play to the level that they all thought. It all sucks. There's a lot of blame or whatever you want to say, responsibility to go around. But I think it is safe to say most people involved wanted this to happen. They just could not make this work.
It's March 11th. I feel like a third of the league wouldn't pass a physical right now, especially one that was as demanding as apparently this one was. I will say what I started with, guys. We need to hear from the Ravens. We need to hear from the Ravens. We need to hear a lot more information because
I don't know that we will.
Well, they should, because there's a lot of accusations out there. There's a lot of fans who have questions. And I'll tell you this, we'll talk about this moving forward. They lost a lot of players. They really need a pass rusher, one of the worst pass rushers in the league last year. The way this gets even more nuclear is if somehow, some way, they go after Trey Hendrickson now in the wake of all this that would present a whole plate of advantages to them. We'll see. Guys, we have to get to L.A. We're going to talk to Ian. We're going to talk to Tom Moore a lot today because I have a lot more questions, and I know the fans do as well. L.A., you've been waiting patiently while we deliver the raw information. We have Jason Gambetta. We have Shelby Harris, and I know you guys have thoughts on this. Really strange time. It's not dire and heavy. It's just football. It's fun. It's interesting. What are your thoughts on everything that's going on with Maxx Crosby to the Ravens, back to the Raiders?
Honestly, this is tough. I'm not even sure what to say. Look, I tore my meniscus my last year in the league. I had a trim. Obviously, Maxx Crosby had a full repair. My recovery is about 6 to 10 weeks. He is 8 weeks post-op. Obviously, it is a longer recovery. It's not like Maxx Crosby was out there training last week, cutting around, running hoops, practicing pass rush drills, and he did something and tried to keep it quiet. The trade went through, and then the Ravens caught it. That's not the situation here. And the reality is, if I'm any other team, unless Lamar Jackson or Kyle Hamilton is on the trade block, I'm not even picking up the phone for the Baltimore Ravens. There's a lot of trust issues now with this organization.